Hello, Mount Calvary, and welcome to your daily devotional. I'm Vicar Tim, and we're continuing through Judges. We're going to talk about two heroes today, Shamgar and Barak. But before we get into Shamgar, who has a total of one verse about him in the whole Bible, let's remember where we left off. We left off yesterday with Ehud, who killed the very fat king of Moab. And then Ehud secured 80 years of peace for Israel. And then in this time, somehow we have Shamgar. So let's go ahead and read Judges chapter 3, verse 31 together. After Ehud came Shamgar, son of Anath. He killed 600 Philistines with a sharp stick used for herding oxen. So he too rescued Israel. A sharp stick used for herding oxen. Now the ESV and the Evangelical Heritage Version, I think the King James, the NIV, I think they all use ox goad. And so think about this. Shamgar killed 600 of his enemies with a farming tool. You know, the ox goad, here it says it was 8 feet long, so a huge stick. And on the thicker side with a hoe was 6 inches wide in circumference, and at the thinner end was a sharp point to help guide the ox forward. This was a tool to keep the ox in line as they're able to till the ground into harvest. This is a farming tool, and Shamgar uses it to kill 600. It's interesting that he only has one verse. It's almost as if Shamgar hears the voice of God calling to him to kill and to listen to God, and he grabs the nearest tool he could, he makes it to a weapon, and he succeeds because he listens. And then he's out of the story. But he rescued Israel. He saved Israel, just like Ehud, just like Othniel. But Shamgar doesn't have much to say. And after Shamgar, we get to Barak. Barak, who we'll talk about a little longer. Today we're going to see how he gets called through Deborah. So we're going to read the first 9 verses of chapter 4. After Ehud died, the people of Israel again did what the Lord considered evil. So the Lord used King Jabin of Canaan, who ruled at Hazor, to defeat them. The commander of King Jabin's army was Sisera, who lived at Harosheth Hagoyim. The people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help. King Jabin had 900 chariots made of iron, and had cruelly oppressed Israel for 20 years. Deborah, wife of Lapidoth, was a prophet. She was a judge in Israel at the time. She used to sit under the palm tree of Deborah, between Ramah and Bethel, in the mountains of Ephraim. The people of Israel would come to her for legal decisions. Deborah summoned Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh and Naphtali. She told him, "The Lord God of Israel has given you this order. Gather troops on Mount Tabor. Take 10,000 men from Naphtali and Zebulun with you. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, his chariots and troops to you at the Kishon River. I will hand them over to you." Barak said to her, "If you go with me, I'll go, but if you don't go with me, I won't go." Deborah replied, "Certainly I'll go with you, but you won't win any honor for the way you're going about this, because the Lord will use women to defeat Sisera." So Deborah started out for Kadesh with Barak. An interesting story, right? We have the setting. Ehud's dead. Israel does what Israel's going to do repeatedly. They leave God, and God sends a punishment. This time it's King Jabin. And Jabin has a commander who lives in Harosheth Hagoyim, the iron facility, the ironsmith of the nations. This is kind of the place, it seems like, where they do all the iron manufacturing. And here we see an important detail. Israel's at a huge disadvantage. They have 900 iron chariots. Israel have none. They have all the military power. So Israel's at a disadvantage. And here we have Deborah, who's singing in the mountains as the judge of Israel, the head legal person, the person people come to for advice. And she gets a message from God to get Barak, which means lightning, and tell him that the Lord has given them an order to gather 10,000 men. If you notice, Barak's a little reluctant. He's not so sure if he's the right guy. He doesn't believe it almost, so he asks Deborah to come with him. And Deborah obliges. This is a great story because it reminds me of the reality that God often uses community in our lives to direct us. Oftentimes there are people who God is calling to do certain things, but those people don't see it. We often see this with young kids in high school, where we encourage them to maybe think about, you'd be a great teacher. You'd be a cool nurse. You'd be a great deaconess. You'd be a great pastor even sometimes, a great DCE, and we encourage them. Sometimes those kids don't see it. They don't see that they would be a great fit for that. In fact, that's the last thing on their mind. But God is using that community to be that voice to maybe prompt them along that direction. And then we even see it with boards. You'd be a great board member on this. You'd be a great volunteer. If you have time, we would love to have you. You're an excellent fit. People often don't see themselves as other people do. And unfortunately, a lot of time people cut themselves short and they don't understand how gifted they are and how God is really calling them. And so I would encourage you this weekend to remember that community is essential. The family of God, gathering together, encouraging each other, directing each other, figuring out where God is calling us is an unbelievable gift. And sometimes God will use that gift of community to call us where He wants us to be. So I would encourage you to be open to where God might be calling you to serve. And also, I would encourage you to think about where God might be calling those around you to serve. Think about maybe talking to them and trying to bring them into the community and help serve in a new way. Don't be too pushy about it, but just bring it to them. Have a great day, Mount Calvary.